A blind former intelligence analyst, haunted by a past mission, must use his heightened senses to dismantle a shadowy conspiracy that has resurfaced and now threatens to silence him forever. The city never truly slept. For Elias Thorne, it was a constant, shifting symphony. Rain slicked the pavement, each droplet a tiny percussive tap. The city's hum wasn't a drone, it was a distant thrum, a low-frequency pulse from 1,000 different engines and electrical grids. Elias moved with a quiet, unhesitating certainty, his simple black carbon fiber cane a quiet extension of his will. Its tip, capped with a durable polymer, made a distinct, almost silent sound as it met the ground, a sound he knew intimately. His eyes, rendered years ago by a mission gone wrong, no longer perceived the world of light and shadow, but his ears, his true instruments, painted a picture of incredible detail. He didn't just hear the rain, he heard its specific pitter-patter on the corrugated metal of a rusted dumpster to his left, the heavier splash as it hit a puddle in front of a sewer grate. He felt the subtle change in air pressure as he passed under the low-hanging awning of a building, and he could pinpoint the exact location of a distant, low throb of a generator somewhere to his right, its frequency a steady heartbeat in the urban noise. His facial expression was one of deep concentration, a tranquil focus that belied his surroundings. His face, sharp-featured and framed by a well-groomed beard, was a perfect mask of calm. Suddenly, a sharp, panicked voice cut through the symphony, assaulting the quiet order of his world. Milo, VO, strained, breathless, his voice distorted by a bad cellular connection. "Elias, you gotta listen. The whispers, they're real. It's the project. The damned project is back." The voice was Milo's, a former colleague from his days at the agency, a man whose trust Elias had misplaced once before. Milo had a habit of overreacting, but the frantic edge to his voice, the shortness of his breath, was genuine. Elias felt a small, cold knot of dread form in his stomach. He hadn't heard from Milo in over a year, not since the incident that had cost Elias his sight and nearly his life. Elias, low, calm, his voice a steadying anchor against Milo's panic. "Where are you, Milo? Slow down. Just tell me where you are." Milo's voice grew more frantic, the distinct sound of a distant, high-pitched ringing joining his panicked words. It was a synthetic, almost electronic sound, like the whir of a quantum hard drive. It was a sound Elias knew from the archives, a sound he had heard whispered in the corridors of the agency's secure facilities. It was a signature. "Milo, Theo, I'm at the old drop site. Don't come here. They're here. They know. The echo. It's the echo, Elias, from the files. They knew. They're here. The echo. It's a trap." The call was a live feed of Milo's panic, a direct line into a nightmare. Elias's face tightened, the grim line from before becoming more pronounced. He wasn't just listening to a voice, he was listening to the entire scene. A violent scuffle erupted. Elias heard the distinct scrape of a shoe on concrete, followed by a grunt of pain. The frantic sound of Milo's ragged breathing became muffled, followed by a brief, desperate choke. The high-pitched ringing cut out abruptly, replaced by a final, wet sound, the sickening, unmistakable sound of a blade entering flesh. The silence that followed was a vacuum, louder than any sound. The city's hum felt suddenly empty, the rain's percussion a hollow beat. Elias froze, his hand clenching the cane so tightly that his knuckles whitened. His heart rate, usually a steady, meditative rhythm, spiked, a frantic drum against his ribs. The tranquil mask he wore shattered, and his face was a picture of cold fury and gut-wrenching grief. A single tear, unseen by anyone but felt by him, traced a hot path down his cheek, quickly cooled by the rain. He didn't need to see the scene to know what had happened. He'd been an intelligence analyst for a reason. He didn't just hear sounds. He connected the dots that others missed. The sudden silence, the specific cutoff of sound, the violent resolution. This wasn't an accident. This was a message. This was personal. This was the echo Milo had warned him about, and it was singing its truth in the silence. Elias took a deep, shuddering breath. He was no longer just listening to the world. He was listening for the enemy. Elias sat in his sparse, meticulously organized apartment where every object had a specific place, known not by sight but by memory. The air, thick with the scent of old paper and dust, was a constant, comfortable presence. He sat at his simple wooden desk, the cool, smooth surface familiar beneath his fingertips. His face, still etched with the grim lines from the night before, was a portrait of focused resolve. He held a small, encrypted USB drive, its smooth plastic casing a sharp contrast to the textured paper he was used to. He slid the drive into the laptop, the click of the port a precise, mechanical note. He couldn't read the screen, but he didn't need to. He had spent years programming a series of intricate macros, a kind of internal language that translated visual cues into auditory ones. He pressed a key combination, his fingers flying across the keyboard with the dexterity of a concert pianist. A distinct, repeating chime indicated a failed decryption attempt, a short, frustrated tone. Elias, to himself, a low, frustrated murmur. Brute force won't work. He knew that. Milo was sloppy, but not that sloppy. He pressed a different key combination, and the laptop responded with a faint buzzing sound from its speakers. An encrypted audio file was now being played. Elias reached for his custom-made headphones, the ones that could isolate frequencies and pinpoint sounds with uncanny precision. They were a gift from the agency, a final, cruel joke. He placed them over his ears, and the world outside faded into a muffled hum. He listened. At first, it was just static, a meaningless digital hiss, a wall of noise designed to confuse and obscure. But Elias didn't listen to the noise. He listened through it. He filtered out the white noise, focusing on the subtle layers beneath. His head tilted slightly, a natural, almost unconscious motion. His brow furrowed in concentration. The static was a blanket, but he could feel the coldness beneath it. Then he heard it. A distinct, rhythmic, clicking sound, faint but persistent, like a metronome with a stutter. It wasn't random. It was the sound of a mechanical watch with a broken second hand, a very specific beat. Elias's face, a mask of tranquil focus a moment ago, now showed a flash of recognition. His eyes, though sightless, widened in the darkness. He knew that sound. It was an echo from a past he had tried to bury. He had heard it once before, years ago, in the sterile, air-conditioned corridors of the project's secure facility. It was the signature sound of a classified timepiece issued to only a select few. Elias whispering, his voice a strained, breathless note of grim realization. The echo. Milo wasn't talking about the files. He was talking about this. He felt a cold wave of dread wash over him, but it was quickly replaced by a hot flash of anger. The sound was not just a key to the encrypted file. It was a ghost in the wire, a phantom of his past. It was proof that the very mission that had taken his sight was back to finish what it started. It was the sound of the enemy. He replayed the clip, his hands shaking slightly, the tiny vibrations a stark contrast to his usual stillness. He listened to the click again, this time with a new understanding. It was a signature, a taunt. The people who had taken his sight were now taking his friend, and they were leaving him a message. The sound was a ghost, and the ghost was speaking to him. Elias, to himself, his voice laced with a cold fury. You think you can hide in the noise? We'll see. You're not a ghost. You're a target. and I know your heartbeat." He removed the headphones, the quiet hum of his apartment returning to his ears. The sound of the clicking watch still reverberated in his mind. He was no longer just an analyst. He was an avenger. The world had gone dark for him, but for those who had wronged him, it was about to get very loud. Elias sat alone at a small, wobbly table in the corner of a bustling coffee shop. The air was a symphony of ordinary city sounds. The low, constant rumble of traffic outside, the intermittent jingle of the door, the hissing and whirring of the espresso machine behind the counter. He didn't just hear them, he processed them. He knew the difference between the high-pitched clatter of a ceramic mug on a table and the deeper, muffled thud of a paper cup being placed on a counter. The murmur of conversation wasn't a blur. It was a series of distinct tones and inflections, each one a different story. His face was a picture of serene calm, his head tilted slightly as if listening to a quiet secret only he could hear. A cooling cup of tea stood untouched before him, the scent of bergamot a faint presence in the air. Suddenly, a new sound entered the symphony. It was a soft, almost imperceptible click. The same rhythmic, broken beat he had heard on Milo's encrypted recording. The sound was distinct from the metronomic tick-tock of the clocks in the shop. It was unique, a signature. Elias's impassive expression didn't change, but his body language did. His posture grew rigid, his back straightening in his chair. He calmly reached for his black cane and placed it on the table, the slight tap of the metal tip against the wood a silent signal of readiness. The clicking was now closer, just outside the cafe's door. He could hear the deliberate, rhythmic tap of a hard-soled shoe approaching, a clean, precise rhythm against the worn tile of the sidewalk. It was a purposeful gait, devoid of the random meandering of a typical pedestrian. A man, Silas, 40s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his face a cold mask of focus, entered the cafe. His eyes, sharp and analytical, swept across the room. He wasn't looking for a blind man. He was looking for someone who could see, someone who would be checking their phone or nervously glancing around. His gaze passed over Elias without a second thought. Elias, without a word, slid out of his chair. He moved with a practiced fluidity, his cane a quiet guide as he headed toward the kitchen's swinging door. The click of Silas's watch grew louder, closer. Elias knew he had been identified, but not how. He didn't have a visual footprint. The echo was what gave him away. Silas's presence, the quiet click of his watch, was the acoustic signature of his enemy. Elias entered the kitchen, and the symphony of the coffee shop was replaced by a new, more chaotic orchestra. The sizzle of a flat-top grill, the aggressive hiss of a steam laund, the loud clatter of pans. An angry shout from a cook, "Watch it!" echoed off the metal surfaces. Elias, however, moved through the chaos with practiced grace. His heightened senses weren't a burden, they were a shield. He used the loud, distracting noise as cover, his every step a deliberate act of precision. He navigated the narrow space, weaving between bustling staff, his mind mapping every obstacle, every sound. He heard the slight groan of a refrigerator door opening, the distinct clink of a metal spatula against a griddle. He reached the back exit, a door leading to a narrow alleyway filled with overflowing dumpsters and the low hum of an air conditioning unit. He slipped out into the rain-slicked alley, a ghost in the dark. The city's chaos was now his cloak. He knew Silas would be moments behind him. He heard the muffled swing of the kitchen door opening, followed by a curse. Silas's footsteps, now hurried and frantic, echoed into the alley. His face was a fleeting scowl of frustration, a brief crack in his cold facade. He had underestimated the invisible man. Elias moved with a new sense of purpose, his steps quick and light as he disappeared into the labyrinthine network of urban streets, the rhythmic click of his pursuer's watch a fading, frantic beat behind him. Elias knew he needed help, someone with eyes. The city was a maze he could navigate, but the digital labyrinth was a world he could no longer see. He found his way to a crowded public library, the air a gentle hum of quiet conversations and the faint rustle of turning pages. He moved through the aisles with an unhurried confidence, his cane tapping a light, rhythmic beat on the polished floor. He stopped at a specific shelf, his fingers brushing against the worn spines of classic novels. He had chosen this location for a reason. It was a relic of an old analog world, a place where people still came to connect with physical objects. He reached for a specific book, The Catcher in the Rye, a book that, to the untrained eye, was just an old paperback. But to Elias, it was a dead drop, a hollowed-out compartment he'd used in his former life. He placed a small folded note inside, his movements precise and silent. The note was a single line of cryptic text. "The echo sings the truth of the last whisper." It was a phrase only a few people would recognize, a ghost from a past that was now hunting him. Within minutes, a young woman, Lena, 20s, a tech genius with a fidgety energy, found the book. Her head was a mess of bright pink hair, her hands a blur as they moved over a tablet, but her eyes, framed by thick black glasses, were sharp and focused. She had been tracking Elias's digital footprints since Milo's message, following the strange coded signals he was leaving behind. Her eyebrows furrowed in confusion as she read the note. She didn't understand the words, but she recognized the pattern, the deep layer coding that a former operative would use to communicate. Lena, to herself, her voice a low, intrigued murmur. "The echo sings the truth of the last whisper." What the hell is that supposed to mean? It's not a cipher, it's a riddle. She looked up, her gaze scanning the library. She expected to see someone watching her from a distance, a man in a trench coat, but all she saw were students and old-timers reading. Her gaze passed over Elias without a second thought. She looked at the book again, her mind racing. She was used to digital mysteries, not analog ones. Suddenly, a voice spoke from her right. It was low, calm, and utterly devoid of fear. "Elias," quietly. "You took the bait. Good." Lena jumped, her tablet clattering against the table. She looked at Elias, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and confusion. He was a blind man, his face a perfect mask of calm, a stark contrast to her own flustered expression. She saw his hands, clasped together over the cane, not trembling in the slightest. There was no fear in him. That in itself was terrifying. "Look, I don't know who you are, but you just startled me. How did you know? I've been trying to find the source of that code for hours." "My friend is dead. The same people who want me dead killed him. They'll come for you next. Unless you help me, I need your eyes. You have the mind to see the patterns." Elias's words hung in the air like a cold threat. He spoke with such grim certainty that Lena's scoff died in her throat. She looked at the man before her, at the scar that traced a line from his temple to his cheek, a physical reminder of the kind of life he had lived. His expression was one of absolute, unwavering resolve. It was not a plea, it was a statement of fact. Her skepticism warred with a rising tide of fear and a spark of genuine curiosity. Her brow furrowed in a slight frown. "What exactly do you see that I don't? I mean, I see a lot of things. What makes me different? What makes this worth my life?" Elias didn't answer right away. He just listened, his head tilting slightly as he heard the quiet, almost imperceptible tremor in her voice. He had to show her, not just tell her. He reached out and gently placed his hand on the spine of the book she was holding. He didn't just feel the texture, he felt the faint vibrations of a conversation happening 3 aisles over, the subtle hum of a server rack hidden in the back. His hand was a delicate instrument, a conductor leading a silent orchestra. Everything, I hear the whispers, the echoes, the ghosts in the machine. You have to see them. Now, let's go. They'll be here soon." Lena looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and dawning comprehension. She had a mind that saw patterns in code, but Elias's mind saw patterns in sound. She realized that he wasn't just blind, he was something more. He was a weapon, and now she was an accessory. The library, once a place of quiet refuge, suddenly felt like a cage. She didn't need any more convincing. She nodded once, her face a pale but determined mask, and followed him out into the noise of the city. The space was a chaotic mess of servers, wiring, and screens. The air smelled of ozone and stale coffee, a digital workshop humming with 1,000 tiny electric heartbeats. Lena sat hunched over a keyboard, a half-dozen monitors displaying a frantic cascade of code and waveforms. Her fingers flew across the keys, a blur of motion that spoke of both frustration and an almost manic energy. Elias stood nearby, a patient observer, his head tilted slightly, his face a calm mask in the pulsing glow of the monitors. He listened to the symphony of her world, the high-pitched whine of a server fan, the soft click of her mouse, the rhythmic tap of her fidgety foot against the concrete floor. He was a silent anchor in a storm of information. I've cross-referenced the audio file's unique frequency with every known piece of project data. Nothing. It's a dead end. The signature you described isn't in any of the archives. It's like it doesn't exist. I'm hitting a brick wall. Lena's hands stopped their frantic motion, and she threw them up in frustration, her gaze fixed on the blank, unyielding screen. Elias, without a word, held up a hand. His face was still, but she could feel the change in his presence. The stillness wasn't passive, it was coiled, like a spring waiting to snap. No, it's a ghost. But ghosts leave traces. Play the file. Lena sighed, a sound of weary surrender, and replayed the static-filled audio file. The room was filled with the hiss of digital noise, a meaningless cascade of white sound. Lena's face was a study in doubt, her skepticism a tangible force in the room. "Lena, Elias, I've been staring at this for hours. There's nothing there. It's just static." Elias closed his eyes, his head cocked to the side. He hummed softly, a low note that matched a resonant frequency in the file. He wasn't just hearing the static, he was feeling it, a low vibration in the floor, a subtle thrum in the air. His body was a tuning fork, and the audio file was a melody he had to decipher. His facial expression shifted from passive listening to a look of intense, almost painful concentration. His brow furrowed, and his lips thinned into a grim line. Low, his voice barely a whisper. "There. A subtle distortion. It's a key, an acoustic key. It's not about what's in the static, it's about what the static is hiding. The signal is being warped by something in the file itself. It's a cloaking mechanism. It was designed to confuse systems like yours. A ghost in the wire." Lena's eyes widened. She stared at the screen, then at him, a sudden glimmer of awe replacing her frustration. She was used to linear logic, to visible patterns. Elias was describing a world of sensory cryptography, a language she couldn't speak. He reached out and gently placed a hand on her arm, his touch a silent, grounding command. "Run it through a phase inverter, then apply a frequency filter at 12.4 kilohertz. It's a specific harmonic, a signature frequency from the project. It's the key to the lock." Lena, her face etched with disbelief, followed his instructions. Her fingers moved quickly, entering the commands he spoke. The static on the screen shifted. The low-frequency hum that had masked the audio bled away, leaving behind a jarring, almost unsettling silence. Then, a new layer of sound was revealed, the muffled, barely audible sound of a conversation. It was fragmented, distorted, almost like an old radio broadcast. Elias's face remained calm, but a subtle tremor in his hands betrayed his intensity. He was listening with every fiber of his being, piecing together the broken fragments of sound. Elias, whispering, his voice strained with the effort. "Listen, it's a meeting. They're talking about a shipment of something called Echo Protocol. It's not a person, it's not a thing. It's a sound, a frequency, and they're calling it a weapon. They're going to use it to silence all the loose ends." Lena's eyes darted from the scream to Elias. The conversation she was hearing was a ghost, a whisper from the dead, a chilling testament to Elias's words. She had seen the code, but he had heard the truth. Her expression transformed, her skepticism replaced by a cold, numbing fear. Elias didn't look at her. He was still focused on the ghost in the machine. He had known this was a trap, but he had not anticipated a weapon. He didn't just hear the words, he heard the intent behind them. The coldness in their voices, the precision of their language. They weren't just discussing a protocol. They were discussing a mass execution. Elias, his voice now hard and cold. Silas. He was the one who developed the Echo Protocol. It was designed to be a trigger, a single subliminal frequency. It's what he used on Milo, and it's what he's going to use on me. Lena stared at the screen, her heart pounding. The static had hidden a weapon, and Elias, in his blindness, had found it. She had followed a ghost, but he had led them to a trap. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that they were now both a part of the sound. The silence that followed was a vacuum, louder than any sound. The cavernous interior of the abandoned warehouse was a symphony of decay. The air was cold, thick with the scent of rust, damp concrete, and the faint, coppery smell of old electrical wiring. Dust motes danced in the lone, broken beam of moonlight that sliced through a shattered skylight high above. Elias and Lena stood before a heavily locked, reinforced steel door, a grim-looking barrier that hummed with a low-frequency, almost imperceptible vibration. Elias's face, a placid mask of concentration, was barely visible in the gloom. Lena, on the other hand, was a portrait of tightly coiled nerves. Her breath hitched in her throat, a faint plume of mist in the cold air. Elias held his cane steady, its tip a whisper away from the concrete floor. He wasn't just standing there, he was listening. His face was strained, the muscles around his jaw taut as he deciphered the sounds within. He could hear the low, constant thrum of a server rack, a sound that a sighted person would mistake for background noise, but for Elias, it was a precise, coded language. Beneath it, he heard a different note, a faint, high-pitched buzz, like a trapped insect. It wasn't a simple alarm, it was a frequency-based tripwire. Elias, his voice low, a soft command that cut through the tension. "It's a tripwire, acoustic. Move your foot 2 inches to the left. No, a millimeter more." Lena froze, her foot hovering in midair. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and awe, darted from his face to the spot on the floor. She had to trust a blind man's judgment on a matter of life and death, an act that felt profoundly absurd and terrifying. Her brow was beaded with sweat, despite the cold. She did exactly as he said, her body rigid with tension, her breath held. The faintest brush of her shoe against the concrete, a sound barely audible to her, but a cacophony to Elias, was avoided. He could hear the almost imperceptible shift in the air pressure as her foot moved. Lena, whispering, her voice a little breathless. How do you do that?" Elias, softly, his face still and serene. "I listen." He wasn't just hearing a sound, he was hearing its source, its intent, its vulnerability. He had navigated a city of secrets, and this was just another puzzle. He unfastened a small device from his belt, a miniature sonic emitter. With a silent click, he activated it, and a high-frequency, almost silent burst of sound emanated from it, an acoustic signal designed to mimic the exact frequency of the alarm. The hum from within the room remained unchanged, but Elias heard a subtle, almost instantaneous change in its pitch. The tripwire was now inert. The steel door, a monument to security, was now just an obstacle. Lena's technical genius came to the fore. She produced a small, unassuming device from her backpack, her hands working with a practiced, almost surgical precision. The device whirred softly, a delicate, low-pitched drone. She fed it a few lines of code, and the device's tone shifted, a series of high-pitched clicks and low-frequency pulses. She was mapping the lock's internal mechanisms through its sound signature, a digital mimicry that a person with sight would find impossible. A final, loud clunk echoed through the space, and the door clicked open. They entered. The server room was a cold, silent tomb, a stark antiseptic contrast to the decaying warehouse they had just left. The air was a low, constant hum, 1,000 fans spinning, each one a different note in a complex, almost melodic rhythm. The silence was unnerving. Elias could hear the individual frequencies of the servers, each one humming at a slightly different pitch. The silence was unnerving. He was a master of his own world, but this one was entirely unfamiliar, and he could feel the ghost of the project, a subtle, almost palpable presence in every corner. Elias, his voice low, a strained whisper. It's not about the doors. It's about the servers. The data isn't here. It's in the sound. Each server fan is a unique note. They form a pattern, a sonic map. They're using the vibration of the fans to store the data, not the hard drives. It's a second layer of encryption. They never wanted anyone to find the files on the hard drives. They wanted them to be hidden in the noise. Lena looked at him, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and dawning comprehension. She understood the concept, but the audacity of it was breathtaking. This wasn't just a hideout, it was a masterpiece of auditory espionage, a system designed to be impenetrable to anyone with sight. Elias moved slowly, his hands ghosting over the humming servers, his face a grim mask of concentration. He wasn't just touching them, he was listening with his skin, feeling the subtle vibrations of each fan. His fingers, a delicate instrument, could discern the slightest variation in pitch and rhythm. He found one that was vibrating at a slightly different frequency, a unique note in the sonic map. He pulled a cable from it, a precise and deliberate motion. The sound of the fans shifted. A different one buzzed, its frequency now dominant. Elias, without a word, reached out and pulled another cable. The soundscape of the room shifted again. He repeated this, a strange, silent dance of cause and effect. It was a complex, elegant puzzle, a symphony of his own making. Lena watched, her emotions a chaotic swirl of disbelief, fear, and a growing sense of awe. She had always thought of herself as a genius, a master of the digital world, but Elias was operating on a level she couldn't even fathom. She had seen the code, but he was hearing the truth. He was the key. He had seen the ghost from episode 5 because he was the only one who could truly understand what was hidden in the sound. On the screen, a series of files began to download, a cascade of green text against a black background. The data wasn't in the hard drives. It was a sonic signal that Elias was translating into digital information, a process that was both arcane and breathtakingly beautiful. Elias's face broke into a fleeting smirk, a rare flash of pride and satisfaction that vanished as quickly as it appeared. He had found the ghost in the wire, and now he was going to make it sing. The stale air of the basement, once a haven of technological mastery, was now thick with the scent of betrayal. The rhythmic hum of the servers, which had been a comforting thrum just moments ago, felt like a silent, mocking judgment. Lena's face was pale, a stark canvas for the raw emotions warring within her. Her fingers, which had flown over the keyboard with such frantic energy, were now frozen, hovering over the data she had just decrypted. The screen displayed not the project's files, but a detailed clinical analysis of a single subject, Elias. The dates, the metrics, the observations, it was all there. A detailed report on his every waking moment, his every thought, his every sensory adaptation. Her expression was a mix of horror and disbelief, her eyes wide as she read the lines of cold, objective data. She had spent a week digging for ghosts, only to find a living, breathing one in the man standing next to her. Lena, whispering, the sound barely audible over the hum of the servers, her voice trembling with the weight of the words. The files, Elias, they're not about the project. They're about you. You were the project. Elias's face remained still. He had always known a piece of the truth was missing, a hollow space in his memory that no amount of analysis could fill. He had felt it in the way the project's ghosts sang to him, in the way his senses seemed to operate on a different plane. He just hadn't wanted to believe it. He stood perfectly still, his body an unyielding monolith, a stark contrast to the chaos Lena was experiencing. His silence wasn't a lack of emotion. It was a profound act of control, a man absorbing a blow that he had secretly expected for years. Then a new voice, smooth and practiced, spoke from the shadows. It was a sound that didn't belong in the basement, a voice that was too clean, too composed. Elias felt a sudden, profound coldness, the kind that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. He knew that voice. It was a ghost from his past, a melody he had long since forgotten.
Hello, it's been a long time.
Mia stepped into the light, a small smirk on her face. Her impeccably tailored suit and polished shoes were a stark contrast to the grungy reality of the basement. She was a former colleague, a woman he had trusted with his life, a woman whose every move and utterance he had once meticulously catalogued. Her voice was cold, a betrayal that felt like a physical blow. Her eyes, as she looked at him, were devoid of warmth, just a cold, analytical gleam. She was the one who had disappeared after his last mission, the one he had assumed was dead. He had been wrong. You were the leak. You gave Milo the information, the location. You knew he would contact me. Mia's smirk widened. The betrayal wasn't a secret to be kept. It was a trophy to be displayed.
I've always been the leak, Elias. You were just a test. The project wasn't a conspiracy. It was a failsafe. You are the failsafe.
Her words were like a final fatal blow. Elias wasn't a person to them. He was a weapon, an experiment, a tool to be used and discarded. His whole life, everything he thought he knew, was a lie. He felt the air shift around him. His senses, which had been his salvation, were now telling him a new, terrifying story. He could hear the soft, almost imperceptible rustle of fabric behind him, the distinct metallic click of a safety being disengaged. He felt the cold touch of a gun against the back of his neck. Lena gasped, her eyes wide with fear, a silent scream trapped in her throat. She had followed a ghost, but he had led her to a trap. Elias's face remained impassive, but his heightened senses told him everything. He knew where every single one of them was standing, even Mia. He was the one with the advantage. They thought they had him cornered. They were wrong. The wind howled, a low, constant moan that whipped at Elias's clothes and threatened to pull Lena's hair from its ties. The rooftop was a brutal, concrete stage, the city's chaos muted by the altitude. Below, the lights of cars and skyscrapers blurred into a shimmering golden river. The air, thin and cold, smelled of ozone and rain. Elias and Lena were a study in contrast. Lena was a portrait of raw, uncontained panic. Her breath was coming in short, gasping sobs, her eyes, wide with terror, darting between the three men in tailored suits that had emerged from the stairwell door. They moved with a chilling, synchronized purpose, a single fluid unit. Their leader, Silas, 40s, his face a cold, unyielding mask of focus, held a high-powered semi-automatic pistol, its metal a dull gleam in the pale moonlight. Elias, on the other hand, was an island of serene, absolute calm. His face was a mask of cold resolve, his body a silent monolith against the wind. He didn't just hear the wind, he heard its specific pitch, its subtle variations as it tore around the edges of the building, and he used it to pinpoint the exact location of his pursuers. He could feel the vibrations of their footsteps through the soles of his shoes, the subtle tremor of their weight on the rooftop's concrete. Silas stopped 10 feet away, a small, triumphant smirk on his face. The rhythmic, broken clicking of his watch, a sound that had hunted Elias across the city, was now a loud, arrogant taunt. Silas, coldly, amused, his voice a low, confident growl. "It ends here, Thorne. Your heightened senses won't save you from a 15-story drop. You can hear the world, but you can't see the ground. The ultimate irony." Elias smiled, a grim, determined expression that didn't reach his sightless eyes. It was a quiet, profound act of defiance. The wind whipped past them, a cold judgment on the rooftop. "Elias, I don't need my senses to save me. I just need them to guide me. You're predictable, Silas. Your heartbeat is too fast. Your men, they're breathing too hard. They're afraid of the dark, and you're afraid of what I am." Silas's face contorted in a brief, furious flash of emotion, but it was gone as quickly as it came. Elias had struck a nerve. He wasn't just a ghost, he was a walking, talking truth serum. Elias took a step back, then another. The wind howled louder, its sound a high-pitched shriek. He was standing on the very edge, the concrete lip of the rooftop, a single, dangerous step away. Lena looked at him, her face a mask of pure terror, her eyes screaming a silent plea. "Lena, no, don't do it." Elias, his voice calm, a low, steady command that cut through her fear. "Jump, now." He didn't hesitate. He pushed her, a precise, calculated motion that sent her sprawling backward over the edge of the rooftop. She screamed as she fell, her voice a high-pitched shriek that was swallowed by the wind. Elias was already in motion. He didn't fall. He launched himself forward, his hands finding the fire escape ladder with uncanny precision. He didn't see the ladder. He felt it. The cold steel rungs were a familiar presence, a cold lifeline in the dark. He grabbed it, his feet landing on the rungs with a muffled thud. He heard Lena land safely on a lower balcony, the sound of her body hitting the concrete a reassuring thud against the frantic screams of the wind. He descended, his every move a precise, soundless ballet. He heard the panicked shouts of Silas's men, their footsteps thundering against the metal stairs. But they were too slow. Elias moved with a fluid, silent grace, a ghost in the dark. He heard Silas curse, a furious, frustrated roar that was swallowed by the wind. He was in a world he could not see, and they were blind in a world he had created. They had built a weapon, and now that weapon was hunting them. The air in the subterranean headquarters was cold and stale, smelling of metal and sterilized air, a stark contrast to the dusty decay of the warehouse. The space was a massive circular room, its walls a smooth, dark gray composite. A low, constant hum filled the air, a deep, resonant thrum that seemed to vibrate in Elias's very bones. It was a symphony of control, a sound meant to soothe, to obscure, to dominate. This was the source of the echo, The Echo Protocol. Elias's head pounded, not from pain, but from the sheer amount of information his senses were now processing. He could feel the electrical currents in the wires behind the walls, the subtle vibrations of the air as it moved through the vents, and 1,000 tiny, distinct heartbeats that weren't his own. He knew what they were. They were the server fans, each one a unique note in the sonic map he had deciphered. He also knew he was at the end of the line, the final puzzle piece in a game that had cost him everything. Lena stood beside him, her face a pale but determined mask, her eyes wide as she took in the sterile, terrifying landscape of the room. She felt the chill in the air, but she didn't know the full extent of the aural assault on Elias's senses. She could hear the hum, but for her it was a living, breathing entity. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the low thrum, the rhythmic clicking of Silas's watch. It grew louder, a confident, measured beat that echoed in the vast space. He was here, and he knew he had won. He entered the room, his movements fluid and unhurried. The smug look on his face was a portrait of pure, unadulterated triumph. Silas, coldly, his voice echoing in the space. "You made it, Thorne. Impressive, but you're too late. The protocol is live. The ultimate weapon, a sound that can silence everything. A ghost that can kill the living." Elias's face remained a mask of calm, but Lena felt him tense beside her. She knew that he was absorbing every last detail of Silas's presence, every subtle shift in his tone, every arrogant breath he took. He wasn't just listening, he was dissecting. "Elias," softly, his voice a quiet command that only Lena could hear. "The protocol, it's a sound, a single subliminal frequency. It's what you used to trigger your agents, to silence them. You weren't a mastermind, Silas. You were a conductor."
Silas's face contorted in a brief, furious flash of surprise, a crack in his icy exterior. He hadn't expected Elias to understand. He had expected him to be a weapon, not an analyst. The cold arrogance in his face melted away for a fleeting moment, replaced by a raw, naked shock that was gone as quickly as it came. Silas, his face twitching, his voice laced with a sudden, dangerous edge. "How did you know? What did you hear?" Elias, a cold smile on his face, a grim and determined expression. "Because I am the source. You gave me my senses, Silas. You thought you were creating a weapon, a perfect asset, but what you really created was a perfect listener. The project was designed to create the perfect analyst, to hear what no one else could. You made me, and now I'm going to make you listen." Elias turned to a complex control panel, his hands moving with impossible speed. His fingers, a blur of motion in the dim light, found the buttons by touch alone, a man playing a piano only he could hear. He wasn't just pressing buttons, he was composing. The low hum of the room, the distinct frequencies of the server fans, and the unique, high-pitched whine of the echo protocol itself, they were all notes in a song he was creating. Lena, her eyes wide with understanding, saw what he was doing. He was not just trying to stop the protocol, he was going to weaponize it. He moved a series of sliders, his face a portrait of intense concentration. The low hum in the room intensified, growing louder, more piercing. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a physical force, a vibration that rattled Silas's teeth and shook the very foundation of the building. The high-pitched whine of the echo protocol, once a low and subtle presence, was now a loud, aggressive shriek, a cacophony of pure noise. Silas's smug expression was replaced by one of raw, visceral agony. He screamed, his hands clamped over his ears, but it was useless. The sound wasn't external. It was a feedback loop of pure noise, a symphony of chaos that only Elias could wield. The very air around them felt like it was tearing, ripping apart at a subatomic level. Silas's scream was a high-pitched wail that was swallowed by the immense, painful noise. Elias had found the echo, and he was using it to make his enemy blind, deaf, and finally, silent. A week had passed. The frantic, almost deafening echo of the world's quietest war had faded, leaving a silence that was almost as profound. Dust motes danced in a lazy sunbeam that cut through the living room, a slow, gentle ballet against the backdrop of a city that had returned to its normal, chaotic hum. The air smelled of old books, fresh coffee, and something else, a lingering, electrical tang of a recent storm. Elias sat motionless in his armchair, a statue carved from stillness. His face was at peace, the deep lines of stress from the past weeks smoothed out, but his eyes, though they couldn't see, were distant. They looked not at the room around him, but at a place only he could perceive, a landscape of sound that had been forever changed. Across from him, Lena held a porcelain teacup in both hands, the warmth a small comfort against the chill of the unsaid. Her gaze was fixed on him, a mixture of awe and profound sorrow. She had seen him do the impossible. She had watched him, through a series of complex data readouts, turn the very weapon designed to control the world against its creators. Lena, softly, her voice barely a whisper. "You were right. The core frequency, it was a trigger, a single, almost imperceptible note designed to resonate with every living thing, to control the world's population from the inside out. They called it the divine hum." Elias said nothing, but a faint, almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of his mouth acknowledged her words. "But you found it. In the middle of all that noise, that digital cacophony, you found the one silence they left. You took their harmony and turned it into discord, a weapon that broke their beautiful, terrible symphony." She set her cup down, the gentle click of ceramic on wood sounding like a gunshot in the quiet room. She leaned forward, her elbows on her knees. The victory should have felt triumphant, but it felt hollow. "Elias, the echo is gone." His voice was a low rumble, worn from a week of not speaking. "Elias, the great hum, it has ceased. The world is loud again." Lena, nodding slowly. "They're gone. The project is over." Elias, his head tilting slightly to the side, a gesture of listening. "But the whispers remain." Lena closed her eyes, a deep sadness settling over her. She knew what he meant. The sound of the world was now forever tainted for him. It was a phantom limb, a constant sensation of what had been and what could have been. The hum was gone, but the ghost of it lingered in every chirp of a bird, every distant siren, every rustle of the leaves. He was no longer just a man who couldn't see. He was a man who had heard too much. "Elias," his voice growing softer, almost confessional. "I hear the notes, Lena. The ghost notes. They're woven into everything now. The cadence of your breath, the gentle tick of the clock. They whisper to me of what they almost did, what I almost let them do. You saved us, Elias, all of us." "I don't feel saved. I feel full, overflowing with a sound that doesn't exist. Like my mind is a sieve, and the sand just keeps coming." Lena reached out, her hand hovering just above his. He didn't flinch. She saw the tension in his jaw, the subtle tremor in his fingers. The moment he had found the frequency, the chaos of their control room, the frantic typing, the sweat on her brow as she watched his work in real time, all of it felt so far away. But for him, it was still happening. "Lena," her voice cracking slightly, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know it would be like this." Elias, shaking his head, "You couldn't have.
No one could have. It's the price of seeing with your ears. I saw the whole thing, the whole beautiful, terrible picture, from the first note of their plan to the final, shattering discord. She finally let her hand drop, resting it on the arm of his chair, her thumb tracing the worn fabric. A quiet understanding passed between them. It wasn't about what she could do to fix it. It was about being there. The silence hung between them, a shared, heavy blanket. Then, Elias looked in her direction, not with his eyes, but with a slight turn of his head, a subtle shifting of his face toward the warmth of her presence. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. It was the first one she had seen in a week, and it was a fragile, precious thing. He extended his hand, not with a command, but with a question, a silent plea for connection in a world of phantom noise. She took it without hesitation, her own hand shaking slightly from the profound relief and the lingering fear. His skin was warm, his grip firm. It was a tangible anchor in the shifting landscape of his mind. The world was still filled with darkness, both literal and metaphorical. The conspiracy was over, but the echoes of it would live with him forever. But as they sat there, hand in hand, she knew she was no longer alone in it, and for the first time in a week, she felt him truly return, not to the silence, but to her.